it's not on here?
There we go.
Okay. So thank you for joining me. I'm here with Argent Templar. This is my first time doing a Google Hangout. And I am in this Google Hangout trying to reach out to alternative communities, get a better understanding of their ideas. And I reached out to Argent, who would help me understand the newly emergent world of the alt-right.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you can introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Argent. I've been around for, I guess, a while now. I had made a channel a couple of years ago, but I've kind of gotten back to it largely because I was inspired by Millennial Woes and some other guys. So I do political videos, I do theology videos. I have a segment called Reactionary Reviews, which a lot of people seem to like, where I kind of tell the story of a movie or book or something and kind of comment on the politics, religion, and themes of it. And I also do character profiles where I try to get kind of the essence of a fictional character. So I do all kinds of stuff.
That's really interesting. For myself, I'm a very amateur blogger. I'm very new to this, but I'm looking to reach out to people who I disagree with, which is sort of my primary passion in all of this. I suppose I should just, some formatting things. I was hoping that we could perhaps do, beyond the basic introduction, a brief little blurb about our own ideology, and then go forward from there to me asking you more questions about the alt-right. But I think it's important for us to establish, the broad overview of where we come from, so it's not just like I'm this anonymous weird person asking you questions.
Okay, well, yeah, you can, sure.
Okay, I guess I'll start with myself. I guess I would best describe my political views as fairly moderate conservative. I'm a pretty run-of-the-mill Orthodox Catholic. I have, I guess, some heterodox views in a variety of areas. I consider myself Burkean, distrust revolutionary changes for the most part. And I have a very strong attachment to Catholicism, and specifically the ideas of natural law theory and St. Thomas Aquinas. Although I confess I've never read the Summa Theologica, like many modern Thomists have not. So I think that's a basic overview of my perspective. Nothing too radical, I suppose. Arjun, do you want to follow up on that with your own?
Sure. I guess for my part, I'd call myself, I guess far right would probably be a good way of describing it.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I guess it's kind of hard, kind of a mixture of different things: Catholic social teaching, anti-egalitarianism. Let me think here. So there's those, nationalism, a whole bunch of kind of right-wing ideas, most of which are not particularly mainstream.
Yeah, no, I have some right-wing views myself. I kind of have a variety from both the right and the left. Probably none too radical, but I guess perhaps that's where we should start. Do you care to define this thing like the alt-right, this, perhaps what sets you aside from mainstream conservatives? A lot of people are calling this the alt-right, now, so.
The alt-right is a broad collection of different groups, all of whom are united in their fundamental rejection of equality. I think it's kind of thing that unites us. And all of us are united in the fact that our views are not permitted to be aired in modern society, I think would be the way to describe it.
I mean, this is a massive umbrella of groups. It must be. I mean, I've only recently looked into this community, and I don't know. I mean, I guess like the community is unified in the fact that it's sort of universally deplored by the mainstream, but beyond that, it's not exactly very easy to find consistent philosophies.
No, there's a lot of different groups. For instance, I frequently get into fights with the radical white nationalists and the neo-pagans. The neo-pagans I often have to block because they're so violent in their rhetoric.
Well, you would actually. I mean, I could you go over some of the groups? I want to eventually
Okay,
go back and
sure.
forth, but actually, I know so
Sure,
little
I'll give.
about this
Okay.
that anything you could tell me would be really interesting to me.
Okay, so there's so basically kind of where the alt-right grew out of. There's I think where it kind of grew out of the same place that the social justice warriors came from. Essentially, there's a generation of middle class, well educated people, mostly white males, who, because of the financial crash, weren't able to start their careers.
Hmm.
And many of them are laying. Do you know what a NEET is?
No, no, tell me.
A NEET is not in education, employment, or training. They're basically people probably my age in their late teens, early 20s who have given up on having a job, having a career. They aren't trying to get more education. A lot of them just kind of are basement dwellers who play video games.
Hmm.
And so you had this whole generation of people who were incapable of getting their lives started. This is combined with a lot of breakdowns in society. Diversity has caused a breakdown of kind of a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. The general blurring of gender roles has caused a lot of dislocation and confusion. Just basically, we're kind of entering. Sorry, I'm a bit tired. I'm a little less coherent than normal.
No, no,
We're entering.
absolutely. I'm reading you perfectly fine. So
We're
thank
entering
you.
what I like to call the crisis of postmodernity, and there were kind of two reactions to the crisis of postmodernity, which was the social justice warrior who took the view that the baby boomers' problem was they didn't go far enough with equality.
Hmm.
That's why they take the view like we have to get rid of white privilege. Everyone has to be jailed at the same rate. Everyone has to get the same grades. We have to force people to breed to create kind of a mixed humanity. We have to have open borders. We can't have culture. We have to blend everything together. And that the failure was that the baby boomers gave lip service to all these things, but they failed to follow through. They
Hmm.
preached free love, but most of them got married and had kids. They preach diversity, but most of them live in gated communities and don't have to live with the side effects of it. Most of them preached atheism, but in their personal life, they held to kind of liberal Christianity that gave them all the benefits of the religion with none of the responsibilities. And then the other group is the edgy kind of guys, kind of the alt right, which is people who took the
Is this what they
opposite
call
view.
edgelords?
What?
Is this what they call edgelords? Just, I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard this term before.
Yeah, and they're basically they're very demographically similar. They're generally young, well-educated, middle-class white people who are not able to get started, or I guess it's a little broader because there's a lot of people who join for a variety of reasons. But basically, it's broadly a group of people who disagree with some aspect of modernity. They view the problem as being that the direction we've taken as a society is bad, and as opposed to going further, we need to go back and undo some of the things we've done. So that's kind of a bit of the narrative of where it came from. So
Hmm.
within this group, there's a lot of different factions. There's do you know who the MRAs are?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I,
so they're technically a faction, and
they're
they
very different, though. Well, I shouldn't talk. You should talk. I'll go into my own experience with this right after you finish. Go.
okay.
So
So
go
like,
ahead.
there's all different kinds of people who, to be, if you've heard the term red pill, that means to reject
Mhm. Yeah.
the common consensus on things in favor of kind of what we would view as the reality of the situation, because we kind of view a lot of what's considered truth as just being politically constructed. Like the idea that there's no biological, sociological, or psychological difference between men and women is
Yeah.
something we'd view as something that has been created for political reasons. So we get a lot of
Yeah.
different
That's.
people who come to it. So the MRAs are one. There's people who come to it through race, and we have different groups of those, ranging from kind of fairly moderate race realists to the wackos over at Stormfront. You have people who reject it on cultural, religious grounds. You have people who are anti-capitalist, and you also have anarcho-capitalists.
Mhm.
but they're all kind of united by a belief that modern egalitarian society has failed.
Yeah, I think this kind of complements my view that what unites this quasi-online movement is more what it's opposed to than what it actually stands for, right?
Right. Well, it's reactionary by nature.
Yeah, I mean that's typically, well, I won't get into criticism at this point. To go over my own experience with this community, if you don't mind.
Sure. Go ahead.
Uh, so I am a person in a technical field, in technology and education, but I sort of have this side interest in philosophy and ideas, and so I kind of came across what I guess at that point would have been like the fledgling or baby alt-right movement in 2005 roundabouts. Just stumbled across it, splitting off essentially what was the paleocon movement or the emergent paleocon movement. And at that point, I kind of dismissed it. It looked really old and it looked like it was just going to die. And then recently, by sort of following this kind of endlessly interesting conflict between feminists and gamers, that's called Gamergate, I stumbled upon it again, and I was kind of amazed at how fast it had grown, I guess. So I decided it was worth another look and another examination. So I guess it takes me to where I am right now.
Yes, Gamergate's a very contentious issue. As I said, I think the financial crisis was really what started both groups, because we had the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street
Yeah.
as being kind of two conflicting responses to that. Gamergate is a very conflicted issue because
For an audience who might not know what Gamergate is, do you want to summarize, or should I? Or
you can. I
okay.
honestly wasn't that interested in it. So.
Okay, Gamergate was a sort of ideological turf war that was that erupted in a response to essentially a lot of ideological progressive journalists entering into gaming journalism and sort of trying to capture that space as a mechanism for talking about progressivism as opposed to gaming. And this resulted in a bunch of more right-wing or moderate gamers essentially protesting against this and trying to go back to the more traditional means of talking only about games and trying to essentially target journalists and game developers that are trying to bring a more progressive slant to video games and video game journalism. I guess it's a very rough overview, but
yeah.
I'm sorry, it's a digression, but
yeah, I was never really interested in it myself.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay.
I mean, like, I play video games a lot, but I guess I just kind of viewed it as being really kind of lame. I didn't really get the point of it, to be honest.
Not to go on too much of a digression, but I hardly play video games at all anymore, and I found it endlessly interesting. And I'll tell you why. The reason why I found it endlessly interesting is it's the first time sort of a progressive takeover of a media institution has gotten serious pushback and has in some sense lost, right? So for that reason, it was really interesting to me.
See, I don't even really see it as pushback. I just think that it was push. It was you can do it, just don't make our video games bad, but otherwise you can do whatever you want. I think the only thing people really cared about was it affected the quality of their games. Otherwise, they don't care. I don't have a particularly high opinion on a personal level of most people in the video game community. I don't. I know a lot of like. There's a lot of edgy people who play video games. There's a lot of decent people like my pal Raging Papist who play video games and cover it. A lot of them though tend to be left-wing atheist, basically degenerates in a lot of cases.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have no idea really. I have no idea about who's in the video game community. I only know the people who started representing the pro Gamergate side, which is like Sargon of Akkad, oh god, there are probably a few more, but mainly Sargon. And I tended to find Sargon a much more sympathetic personality than I did many of his interlocutors, like Bob Chipman or, whatnot on the anti-Gamergate side. So I guess from that point, I had a much more of a pro-Gamergate stance, but or bias, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my own personal opinion. I'm getting off topic here. But anyway, sorry, you were saying about the various groups. Perhaps you could tell me about what what brought you to the alt-right, I guess. Would that be a fair question?
Sure. Well, it depends on the particular aspect. Largely, I kind of increasingly went rightward after kind of being disillusioned going through university.
Were you a progressive at one point?
I was and I wasn't. It's kind of confusing. I thought I was left wing, but I really wasn't. I was probably more like a neoconservative because I called myself leftward, but I supported things like neo-colonialism and like military interventions and that kind of thing. So I probably wasn't. But yeah, I used to consider myself a man of the left. I still am actually fairly left-wing on economical issues. But really, once I kind of went through university and I converted to Catholicism, that kind of pushed me rightward. There's also just kind of the reality of being a middle-class white male in the modern age, where you kind of, by definition, are pushed rightward because society just fundamentally despises you so much. There's really no reason to not be as edgy as possible.
Well, I guess you'd say certain elements in the far left do, and those elements have a strangely powerful voice in modern society.
No,
is what I would say.
Well, it's the law. Every job I've ever applied to has said some variation of white males need not apply.
Some variation of if you're a white male, you don't get the advantages of a preference.
It says we're an equal opportunity employer, which means white males need not apply.
Well, I mean, so I hate to be pedantic, but it means that you're going to have a slight disadvantage, right? Or some disadvantage. We could argue about how much, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
No, I hate being pedantic. Go on. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's basically what it's stating. You have the whole thing where divorce laws, alimony laws, custody laws, now rape laws extremely favor women, to the point where a lot of people I know just don't have sex, are afraid to try to have sex anymore because they're so afraid of fake rape charges.
This is a common complaint with the MRA.
Yeah, well, they're right on that one. I have some very deep disagreements with them. There's the general trashy condition of the modern woman, which is part of the reason why, like in Canada, so many white men who have any kind of self-respect go after Asian women. There's that issue. There's if you I don't know, it's just nothing in society is really kind of set up for us or favors us, so there's no real reason to be loyal to it anymore.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll talk and push back later on after I finish asking my questions. I kind of cut off your development story there, and I apologize if I do this, if I want to interject questions. But you said that you sort of in college you converted to Catholicism. Like, how did that happen, or what brought you to Catholicism?
Well, I just kind of said I'm an adult now. I should stop kind of LARPing with my various mystical things and pick a real religion. In part, it was just kind of the counter signal, because I was just like, well, all these people I hate Christianity, so I should give it another look. I was brought up as an extremely liberal Protestant, so I hated Christianity because of that. And I kind of just went through every denomination and kind of read what they believed. And I found that Orthodoxy and Catholicism made the most sense to me. Orthodoxy is an ethnic religion.
Are you an Orthodox Christian?
What?
Are you Eastern Orthodox?
No, I'm Roman Catholic.
Okay. Sometimes people use Catholic and they really mean Eastern Orthodox. But
no, I'm Roman.
Okay. But you
Uh,
went through Eastern Orthodoxy and came to.
no, I didn't. I said those were kind of the two I was going to
Oh,
pick
okay.
between. But Eastern Orthodoxy is an ethnic religion, so I wasn't really that interested in it
Yeah.
because I'm Anglo-German. So
I actually know a lot of Eastern Orthodox people in my community.
I do too, but it's I just kind of feel if you're not Eastern European, you're kind of LARPing if you convert to it.
Uh, can you explain the term LARPing and how you're using it? Not to
Uh,
keep on going on digressions,
okay,
but
LARPing means live action role playing.
I know it in
Um,
that context.
Basically, it's adopting unrealistic positions to try to look cool.
Yeah.
I guess would be kind of a simple way of putting it.
So this would be sort of to adopt the punk term, being a poser,
Yeah,
right?
it's to um, it's like the people who LARP most are like white nationalists, neo pagans who have like Thor. I am a servant of Thor. I wield Wotan's hammer.
Mm.
Wotan will lead us in war against the invaders, and just there though that's like LARPing.
Yeah, of course. Uh, or not of course, but that's. I think I see what you're saying now.
Mhm.
Um, oh, cool. So, and from there you came to the alt right. By what? I guess you said you got turned on by Millennial Woes, the YouTuber.
Yeah, sort of. Actually, it's what happened was I went to Los Angeles and I kind of had a spiritual moment where I kind of just saw what it was like for blacks in America, despite decades of like trillions of
Mhm.
dollars trying to uplift them. I just came to the conclusion that diversity is pretty much almost always a bad thing for everybody involved, and that it
Mhm.
would be better if we all kind of had our own countries. And I guess that was kind of what sent me in that direction. Also, just the recurrent failure of conservatives to basically win any victories for the last like 100 years.
So, so can I ask you? Were you in the Sargon of Akkad live stream? I watched a
No,
little bit of that. No, okay.
no,
You
that whole
watched
thing
it
was
though,
a
right?
disaster. No, I
Oh
didn't.
yeah. Oh my God, it was so bad.
No, Millennial Woes' live streams are too long for me, and I don't like. I think I think a live stream should be 5 people max. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that needed to be a conversation, and it was just one gigantic
Oh, and
cluster.
they had Nightmares on, and Nightmares is yeah.
He's a member in the alt right community?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. He's kind of a weirdo who just shows up everywhere. He's like, I don't know. He's just, you probably saw him if you were watching Millennial Woes' live stream. He
This
wears
is
like a captain's hat or something, and he has like this
oh,
weird red
I
light.
only watched a little bit of it. He was like the John Lennon lookalike.
Yeah, he's a weird
Okay.
guy.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this is sort of my observation in 2005. I mean, the movement was replete with people who I wouldn't trust at all. You know, people who seemed like they had serious psychological hangups, and the movement was sort of, you know, a way to put those psychological hangups into action, you know, in a futile way, right?
Right.
I mean, that's I said getting a little bit into the critique, but okay. So you came to the alt right through
That and just studying history.
what history in particular?
Lots of different things. I guess European, East Asian, and Middle Eastern.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that is certainly a weakness of the modern progressive worldview, is it seems sort of fundamentally ahistorical,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you know, there's no progressive to defend themselves right now, but there rarely ever is. But I'll say it right now. I mean, it's the main reason why I'm not a progressive, is I know too much about history. You know, history didn't begin 300 years ago, right? Like, it's longer than that, believe it or not, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, they have this strange idea of when history begins and ends that that is never really easy to reconcile. But anyway, well, I mean, thanks for that overview. I mean, so as a person on the alt right, what issues do you think are some? You already said this. What issues do you think are really important right now?
It's a good question. I think immigration is by far the most important issue at the moment.
That comes up a lot from my yeah.
I'd put that as number one. I guess just displacement of the population of North America and Europe is what I put as my number one concern.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, the elites in both North America and Europe are importing a replacement population to basically, well, in the case of Europe,
I mean, Europe, they're not replacing themselves, so it's kind of inevitable, right?
no, well, no, I don't think so. They could just not import people.
They'd have a hard time maintaining their social welfare programs if that were the case.
Yeah, but a lot of us would be willing to accept that. Also, the same people who pushed abortion, who pushed gay marriage, who were anti-natalist are the same people who supported all this stuff.
No, yeah. I mean, there's people who might match. There's people who might advocate the strategy that you're describing as being done. But anyway, yeah. So immigration. And then I think that was it. But there are other issues too, right?
That's kind of priority one.
Okay.
The general effeminization of our culture.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we just don't really have the balls to do anything anymore, frankly. The fact that we basically are losing to ISIS is kind of indications of that. It's just, I don't know. Like,
we're losing a media campaign to ISIS, which is what's really funny, right?
It's kind of hard. I guess it's just I don't like
I mean, people might not realize how we're losing to ISIS because they'll be saying like, I think I might actually agree with you on this particular point. People will say like, well, how are we losing to ISIS? We're not really fighting them. Well, what we're losing to in ISIS is the fact that they're spreading their franchise like nuts online. And we're doing almost nothing to stop that.
I think in general, we have no will to preserve ourselves or defend ourselves at all.
There's some truth. I think there might be some truth to that. Yeah.
I think if anything in the West, we despise ourselves and we welcome our own destruction.
But when you say we, you're talking about a specific set of progressive.
No, I'm talking about the general population.
What?
I'm talking about the general population.
I guess that's harder for me to see, I suppose.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel to a certain extent if people really wanted something different, it would be different. I mean, it's true that nobody voted for any of the things they did, but it's also true that if they were put up for a referendum today, they'd probably pass.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I mean
gay marriage passed.
Oh, you mean gay marriage? Oh, okay. I guess I just see these issues as so distinct. Perhaps you can go into a little bit more about why you see gay marriage and immigration is fundamentally connected.
Well, because they're all egalitarianism. They're all the view that there's no difference between people.
Yes, to a certain extent. Multiculturalism, however, has sort of this unegalitarian streak in it as well.
No,
which is kind of strange. Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's like this anti-assimilationist stuff. I guess some people describe it as non-egalitarian.
I don't know. I view that as egalitarian. Because if it was non-egalitarian, then it would be assimilationist because it would say this culture is superior. It's also the rejection of the idea that you can ask people to do anything for the greater good. But I guess to me, I don't really care about assimilation that much because no, it's just not really that big an issue to me. I kind of just don't think that people should be there to begin with. So
I mean, I guess at this point we're probably transitioning into a little bit more aggressive or probing questions on my side. Mm-hmm. I mean, assimilation would essentially solve the problem.
No, it wouldn't.
Like,
that's assuming there's no biological differences between people.
Okay, but bear with me here. I mean, like America of 1920 was a mishmash of different ethnicities that had been fighting each other brutally for 1,000 years in Europe, right? So assimilation has had some measure of success.
Yeah, but
Not
those
to
were
mean that you
all
couldn't.
very closely related European ethnicities.
Now, the standard conservative comeback is that if we had the pro-assimilationist cultural attitude we did in early 20th century America, essentially we would be able to get a very cohesive society, even from a multi-ethnic immigration policy. Now, I know the alt-right does not agree with that.
Well,
right?
okay. Well, what evidence do you have of that?
The evidence would be the late 19th century, early 20th century immigration wave and its subsequent
but that's not
combination into a unified whole in the mid 20th century.
Okay, but that's not multiracial. That's closely related European groups that all cluster extremely closely together on genetic charts.
Wait, okay. I mean, this is another thing too. I mean, like I said, I'm your middle of the road conservative, right? Like, so I'm not like a progressive, like, oh, these things are all social constructs. But to some extent, the idea of how we divide up races is like, a socially, I mean, like, even if you, for instance, I don't want to argue race realism. That's like the last thing I want to argue. I'm sort of in a debate with anti-Dem right now about race realism. It's the last thing I want to debate.
The core of most of the alt-right. That's kind of the big issue.
At least it's the core of this, this. I mean, it's not core to MRAs, but whatever. I mean, but I guess. Well, I guess I can't really say this. I mean, like, so just to put my own cards on the table, like, I'm an Orthodox Catholic, right? Okay, I believe that humans have worth. So, first of all, on race realism, this is the idea that there are measurable, for people who don't know about this, who might be watching, it's the belief that there are measurable physiological differences between races, and these races can be, these physiological differences can be small if the race is highly related to each other, or they could be large depending on, various factors. And this is like, I think the bell curve, was An Inconvenient Inheritance was another book that came out about 2 years ago, overviewing this argument. It's, to my mind, I guess it's plausible. There are a lot of uncertainties. There are also a lot of effects that you need to explain in order for the science to make a lot of sense, namely the Flynn effect.
What's the Flynn effect?
The Flynn effect is the general tendencies for IQs, even hard measurements of what would be called G, to increase over time. So if you look at the general white population in the United States and the black population in the United States, their IQ has been increasing significantly over the past 100 years since we began measuring it. And this effect has been something that sort of confounded attempts to link IQ strongly with biology.
Well, that's in part because the black population in America is very mixed compared to the black population in Africa.
Sure, but this would not explain the Flynn effect in a white population, though.
Right, but it's still, they all tend to cluster very closely together. Like if you look at Asian countries, they all have very close clustering IQs, even the poor ones.
Yes. Okay. I to tell you the truth, I would let's I'm just going to concede the race real. I'm not going to concede it, but for the purposes of the argument, okay, I would like to say, okay, I'll say for the chat, like, I think there's some caveats, but I'm not in a position. I'm a very, to put my own position flat on the table, I'm highly skeptical when it comes to things like race realism or global climate change. And I'll tell you what, these other like sociological theories from uncertain sciences that are used to drive political movements. And I'll tell you why. These findings come from sciences that are of their very nature highly uncertain. And they frequently do these really, really dishonest statistical techniques where you can come to a confident answer by essentially modifying the question slightly and strategically equivocating to get the right answer. So, for instance, in climate change, a very, very certain idea that carbon that increasing carbon leads to an increasing temperature, which is very, very certain, gets conflated with a notion that a runaway carbon emission will lead to a runaway temperature increase. And while those two questions seem very similar, they're absolutely different. And because of that conflation, there's a lot of dishonesty in climate science. And I mean, the dishonesty is there. You can go burrow down into these documents and read like hundreds of papers and see exactly where they made the mistakes, right? But you can't do that in the debate. And that's what allows these sort of equivocations to really ruin our discussion about what to do about climate change, right? And I feel that there's something similar that could possibly be going on in race realism. There probably is a lot of uncertainty.
Or would you say that the opposite is true?
What?
That the people who deny it also do the same thing?
Oh, yeah, certainly. There's something going on that's not being accounted for by the sort of like, the current progressive ideology, right? Of, race is totally socially constructed, and there seems to be some effect that's going on, just like it is absolutely true in climate change that if you increase CO2, there is going to be an increase of the temperature in a given system. The question is, does that like kernel of a truth then boil out to this extensive theory about clustering peoples into groups that have similar IQs, and those groups that are in the same cluster are necessarily more compatible? I mean, that's where you sort of lose me, right?
Okay, well, I wouldn't even use that. I would mainly use historical examples.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Societies with similar racial groups tend to perform in a very similar way. East Asian societies all have much lower crime rates, have low crime rates, high IQs, social stability. East Asians they all have high life expectancies, even the poorer ones. Generally speaking, pretty much all of sub-Saharan Africa, with the possible exception of Ethiopia, which is at least partially Semitic, tends to have gone not very far at all in the development of civilization.
Sure, but I mean, these are definitely facts in some sense. But I mean, I think we're not giving just the problem with these things is you can burrow down and come up with caveats.
Okay, well, why is Haiti let's look. The only purely African country outside of Africa is Haiti, which basically behaves exactly like an African country.
But this is the perfect example, right? And countries are these very large entities that we do not have proper statistical control on, right? If I were to do this if I were just to consider countries samples in some scientific experiment, a rigorous scientific experiment, we would have 200 of them. None of the interaction effects would be accounted for, right? None of the possible, confounding factors would be accounted for, because we just wouldn't have the sample size to do that, right? So small random effects would be read as a signal when they were just random, right? And it would be a matter of, it's just a sample size, right? We can't make statements of certainty about a sample like this.
Well, I don't know. I just don't think that's how people live their lives. That they only make decisions based on statistics. Well, based on.
Okay. I guess I'm saying it's just not. This isn't a rigorous process.
Okay, so does that mean though that you would be willing to bet that it's not the case and accept the potential consequences of it?
I'm glad you asked that question, because that is, I think, that is the question I have. When it comes to race realism, I assign it some plausible probability, right? But whether I'd be willing to bet on it would be depending on what the stakes were. And I think that's what it really gets down to some of my key objections with the alt-right. Because even conceding, let's just say for the purposes of argument that your race realism, quote unquote, theories are true. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure that gets you to any kind of political action that is workable or even ethical, especially ethical from sort of a, we're both Catholics, so we're both moral absolutists, right?
I don't, depends what you mean by moral absolutism.
we believe that morality and right and wrong are fixed things that can't be changed. We
Yes.
believe that, in sort of the Aquinas sense, the end does not justify the means. Now, I know they're stating distinctions, but that's a principle that we hold, right? When we're talking about things you can do with the knowledge of, even assuming race realism,
Hmm.
You'd have to wonder, like, okay, what's at stake? What am I betting? What are the consequences for being right and wrong about this, right?
Hmm.
It's so difficult right now because this is a very stigmatized belief, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's so stigmatized, I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it without, like, the cover of a light in anonymity, right?
Hmm.
So, but anyway, so I guess what I would say is, I guess to make an aggressive point. So here's my a key objection with this. It seems that the alt-right essentially wants us to cordon off society, if it had its way, to cordon off society into sort of like these ethno-states, right?
Hmm.
Or is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, but here's the problem. Like, hypothetically, considering race realism is true or
Hmm.
somewhat true, assuming that this might work, or this might be an ethical way to organize society, right? But practically speaking, we live in a society where people have made primary bonds of commitment to each other across those ethnic lines, right? There's intermarriage. There are religious and structural communities that cross racial and ethnic lines. In order to kind of like cordon off society this way, we would have to uproot and destroy numerous families, organizations, churches, strong
No, I can
structures of
see that. There
society that would.
should be a People's Republic of Diversity. I just don't want to live in it.
Oh, but I think this brings me to another. I mean, like, I some of this is, I hope this comes off. People who are watching probably are just not. I mean, if you destroyed all of these things like families and societal, like the Burkean societal bonds that hold us together, like,
Those are long since gone.
okay, but they're not, though. I mean, like, you're saying you don't want to live in the People's Republic of Diversity, but if you go around destroying churches and families and social organizations in order to achieve, some kind of racially segregated ethnic
So my
superstate, you
people
will
are
essentially destroy anything that stands in the way of some kind of like overarching dictatorial system that will put you in the People's Republic of Diversity.
well. I don't support democracy, so I don't really care if there's a dictatorship. I would prefer one to the current order. But
I
regards
think
to
you would
that,
prefer a light monarchy, not a dictatorship,
no, I would
right?
prefer a dictatorship.
But so I've talked to anti-dem, and it seems to me that he would prefer, when he says he's anti-democratic, he means that he wants some kind of monarch, like, Henry VII, who's highly controlled by some kind of oversight body like the Parliament, and who has like 1,000 other balances against him with like a church and like barons and stuff like that would weigh against the monolithic authoritarian figure. I thought that was what people meant when they meant they were anti-democratic.
Well, it depends. I'd be happy with Franco or Pinochet if we had them back.
Yeah, but I mean, like, were they successful in doing what like you wanted to do happen?
I don't know.
Though?
They killed a lot of commies.
But here's the second problem I have with the alt-right. Like, its fundamental reactionary nature. It seems like, not to be to be critical. I am being critical right now. It seems like you guys dislike the opposition more than you love what you're ostensibly fighting for, right?
No, well, I think that's true of a lot of people. I wouldn't disagree.
And it's almost, it seems like it's true of progressives too, to tell you the truth. I mean, like, but isn't that? I mean, to me, that's kind of what's fundamentally off-putting about the alt-right. When you're talking about some of your critiques of modern progressivism and modern multiculturalism, to tell you the truth, I agree with a lot of it, right? But at the end of the day, like, I am not anti-multicultural any more than multiculturalism is destroying something that I care to preserve, right? And a lot of the people.
Okay, well, here, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
For those of us who don't want to live in diversity, what should we do?
But here's my question. I don't really care about what you don't want to live in. I want to care about what you do want to live in.
Okay, well, that's what we want to live. Well, okay, but I want to live in a state full of my people.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. I mean, in some sense, I kind of agree with you, but I don't consider that a racial category. I consider that a moral and religious category. But are you saying in my ideal world, what would you do, or in this world, what would you do?
In this world, what am I supposed to do? Because every country where my people are from, that is white people, is being forced to go through diversity. All of them have to accept mass immigration. Japan doesn't, Korea doesn't, China doesn't.
Yes.
Israel doesn't, but we have to accept it and no one else does.
I mean...
And if we object to it, we aren't allowed to vote against it. We aren't even allowed to say anything about it. And there's nowhere where we can go.
So first of all, I'm leaving aside the fact that I think that there's better things to desire than to live among your own ethnicity. I think it's more important to live among a community that has similar moral views than it is necessarily an ethnic community. But let's presume, for instance, that I don't have a problem or an issue with that. I think for your specific case, that's really tough, right? Because you've got like a ton of forces that are arrayed against you, right? Mm-hmm. And the statistics of race realism ain't going to help you, right? Because not only do you have like the hard progressive movement, which considers you guys enemy number one, and will do everything to squash you. They hate you guys more than they hate people like me by a lot, right? You also have multinational, like bureaucratic management optimate types, right? Who also hate you guys because you're a threat to essentially a bottom line. And so, what are you going to do? I mean, like, I have no idea practically what you could do. It seems like a total futile endeavor. I think as far as getting a ethnically segregated white community, it's pretty much a lost cause. Like,
okay, so we're not allowed to express our position, you're basically saying. We can't pursue our own interests, and we just have to basically accept the destruction of our people.
I don't fundamentally understand the question. Are you asking me practically or morally?
Yes. No,
practically. I mean, but you know that this stuff is I don't need to tell you that the stuff that you want is taboo in the society. I think you know it's taboo in the society. Are you asking me if it's taboo or not? Of course it's taboo.
No, it is. I'm just saying. Well, because you were saying that. No, because earlier you were saying you guys can't have this.
Am I allowed to ask for an ethnically? No.
You said if you guys did this, it will uproot families. It'll destroy society. So I'm saying, well, so we are basically being held hostage to that, and we are not allowed to express our own preferences or our own self-determination.
I mean, that's the fact they would uproot families and institutions and religious organizations is my objection to what you're.
I know. Then I was asking you.
But actually, to tell you the truth, the fact that you guys would uproot families and destroy churches would probably be awesome for both the multiculturalists and also the corporatists, because uprooting families and destroying organizations that organize people is what they want.
Okay, well, you didn't answer my question, but
I probably didn't. I'm sorry. What was it?
I was asking, okay, because you said that. So I said, well, what about those of us who don't care about that or just don't want to be part of that? We don't want to destroy families. We just want to go to and have our own country. What are we supposed to do?
Are you asking in my ideal world?
No, I'm saying you said we aren't allowed. So is your position that we aren't allowed to express our right to self-determination because of muff families and muff communities? I
think that you should be able to do whatever in my ideal world, people would be totally allowed to create ethnic societies that are uniform. People do that. There are Jewish communities and
yes, the Jews. Yeah.
well, okay, I shouldn't have used that example. I'm sorry. No, I consider that a positive thing. Like, you've got
No, I do. I'm a Zionist myself.
but you've got like Jewish communities, and you've got like Native American communities, and you've got the Amish. I mean, the Amish is a good example. That's an ethnically that's an ethnically uniform community if there ever was one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a variety of these communities. I think that these these communities that have split off from modern society are awesome, and I actually kind of want to see more of them. Now, I personally don't care about race. But if people wanted to do that in my society, in my ideal, they would be perfectly allowed to do that, just like the Amish and the Orthodox Jews are allowed to create their.
Let me do some cross-examination. Would you be okay living in a society like Brazil, where the middle class has to pay death squads to call the lower classes so they can live some semblance of a peaceful life? Because
that's a way to the crime right there is destroying social community.
Yeah,
right?
Because of diversity. I mean,
okay, great. Like, okay,
no,
we have to distinguish ends from means, right?
Okay, no, but would you accept living in that society? Is your view that we can't uproot society, we can't do this, that? Would you be willing to accept Brazil if that's the consequence of it? A society like that?
I mean, so you're saying if I had to choose between totally racial segregation and community and order, and then diversity with massive crime rates and suffering and pain, yeah, of course I would choose the peaceful racial segregation.
Okay,
right?
Well, that's all we're trying to say.
But I guess I don't think there's a path to that, right? Like, there's no. Well, I mean, I guess you could create that society if those forces I mentioned just wouldn't crush you, which they probably would try to do.
Well, they try to. I kind of feel regardless we're heading. I think Europe will be in a civil war in a decade or two. I think it's basically inevitable at this point.
Well, to tell you the truth, I think there's some truth to that. I'm a pessimist on the Europe question myself. It's but I don't think it had to be this way. I think that if they had done it a little bit differently, they could have made it work.
Well, I don't see why they had to do it at all, to be honest.
Well, I guess they didn't have to. I mean, okay, the reason why they had to do it is because they can't pay for their they can't pay for their entitlement programs with a shrinking population.
Well, Japan.
Everybody knows that, right? Like,
okay,
they couldn't.
Why did they bring them in and put them on welfare then?
What?
Why did they put them on welfare then when they come in?
That's because, here, so from an actuarial point of view, welfare, I hate to nerd out about this, but welfare comprises a very, very small outlay on society in general, right? It's a very, very small cost. Mm-hmm. What costs the most are the end-of-life healthcare concerns, right? Mm-hmm. So if I were to project forward into the future, barring some disruptive trend, I would much rather have young people on welfare who then at some point grew out of welfare in their 40s and started supporting themselves than I would an aging population with no welfare rolls.
Well, you see, this is why we, the alt-right, despise the baby boomers, because we see them as people who sold out thousands of years of civilization because they couldn't be bothered to save for their retirement.
I mean, I don't know. Can you elaborate? I guess I feel like we're kind of that's sort of a tagline. This is the problem also too. Is like, I'm a moderate conservative and you're far alt-right. A lot of us, this is going to come down to just bashing a progressive force that isn't here to defend itself, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess we can't avoid doing that. But okay, let's just say you're right about that, right? Like what do you do? I mean, like, there's not like there's nothing you can really do about that. Like,
well, I think we'll have to start making hard choices. I think we can't just play let's not offend everyone, let's not hurt anyone forever, because sooner or later you get ISIS, or sooner or later you get like, okay, well, let's look at it this way. Because of the current situation and kind of the economy we inherited and the debt that the baby boomers ran up, we have countries like Spain where there's 50% youth unemployment. So we have this situation. So how long do you think it's going to be before the youth start thinking maybe we should start burning the people who did this to us?
That is a danger. I'm not going to say that. That is a distinct danger for how Europe has set up its system.
Mm-hmm.
I
so
mean,
rather than trying to employ those people, they say, well, we're going to bring in a bunch of immigrants and have them do it. And then who gives a shit about our own people?
yeah, because it mitigates their risk for a massive welfare collapse if they have a lot of young people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sort of works on paper if you'll take my word for it.
No, I get it. And that's kind of, I guess a lot of alt-right people kind of view the problem with mainstream conservatives is all they care about is money. Everything is about the free market. Everything's about, we have to increase GDP growth rates slightly. And they would do anything to basically slightly increase GDP. It's the only concern of theirs.
I mean, in that sense, I can see the alt-right's frustration. I'm not really a Republican. I have a handle called the Distributist. I'm kind of a libertarian. I believe in some degree of income redistribution, but I'm not a corporatist. But I can see the alt-right's frustration, right? Because these sort of optimize the GDP things, right, are exactly the kind of thing that has allowed Western societies to cover up for what would naturally be a massive fallout from the destruction of institutions like the family, right?
Right.
If you can constantly keep the growth up, then you'll never have to pay the price for basically burying institutions that would ordinarily keep society afloat in low growth times.
Well, you will. I mean, because you had a generation who was unwilling to pay for what they used up and were unwilling to save for retirement, and they offloaded the costs onto us in the form of debt. And in the case of your country, you're American, right?
Yes.
In the case of your country, the Social Security Trust Fund, which is not a trust fund, and so that was kind of offloaded onto us. And now they're saying, well, guys, sorry, we spent all that money. You're going to have to accept complete societal transformation so that we can keep living on other people's money. And that's kind of the way we see it. And that's why so many of us are young, because we're people who, in this environment that has been created for us, don't really have any reason to not be radical anymore. I mean, we have the company, we have the fake rape charges, we have why would men really want to get married anymore, for instance?
Well, I mean, I'll stick up for women here. I think when you're saying that women are all like this or whatever, like, you're talking about a very, very specific set of very loud feminists. You know, you're not talking about women from traditional communities. You're not even talking about
well, how do women
mainstream women. You're talking about a very specific set of shrill.
Well, who do women vote for anyway on net?
What? Who
do women vote for on net?
They vote for, well, okay, but here's the critical distinction. Mm-hmm. Which women? Married and traditional women tend to vote for conservatives.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, but that destroys your entire point, right?
Why?
Because it makes my point that what you're actually talking about are a particular demographic subset of women and not women in general.
Society?
What?
Who controls society?
That's such a vague question. In what capacity? I don't understand what the question's going.
Okay. Have you ever seen the map if only white males voted?
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I can imagine it would be very conservative.
47 states would go Republican.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain extent, and this is getting into a completely different issue, female suffrage is what allowed progressivism in a lot of cases, because women tend to vote left-wing. Even including married women, they still do on net vote left-wing. And it's largely the dominant force moving politics left.
But here's the thing. I in some sense I agree with you, but this is the problem. I hope I'm not like nitpicking you to death, right? And it's going to sound like I am nitpicking you to death, right? But I think these are key distinctions here, right? in some sense, you're right in that suffragette movement represented a transition from when families voted to when individuals voted, right? But the real break did not come until the huge decline of marriages in the 70s, right? Because once people, if everybody married up and formed families, then essentially suffrage would be would have no effect on the political body whatsoever, right? Because women and husbands and wives tend to vote for the same people.
Mm-hmm.
So all that says is that, like, families get twice the vote. They basically are just to double down on that, which would be really no practical change. No, excepting for a few pet issues, right? Obviously the first one was prohibition.
Well, we'd argue. I would argue it's also a change of role, because traditionally, when we had a patriarchal society, government was kind of the province of men, and once we gave women the vote, I think it was inevitable that we would have to change government to incorporate women.
So you're saying that where does the problem arise then?
Letting women into government fundamentally changes politics.
Can you be a little more specific? I'm not so sure I know what you mean.
Okay, do you believe that women have a fundamentally different psychological perspective than men?
Yeah, well, I'm a Catholic, so I do believe that women and men have complementary, which means different, natures.
Well, let's put it this way.
Equal in dignity, though.
Can you think of a successful matriarchal society?
Yeah.
What?
Like there are tons of matriarchal. I mean, they're all very. By successful, do you mean industrial, large scale, and farming?
Have created something. I don't know, like even buildings.
Oh no, the most matriarchal societies are very low technology. I'll agree.
Yeah,
with
and
that.
they immediately get wrecked by patriarchal societies. The fact that
I'm not so convinced on that point, but from my understanding,
how can
I'd
you
say
not
most
be
matriarchal.
What? How can you? Okay, what is your objection?
Okay, well, let's just go with the agreement that, from my knowledge, most matriarchal societies are low technology.
Okay, well then, how could incorporating aspects of that into a successful patriarchal society possibly improve it?
I mean, wait. So you're making the case that suffrage was essentially an attempt to incorporate matriarchal norms into...
Well, no, I'm saying that was an inevitable result of it. If women...
First of all, I would object to the fact that pre-suffrage, we were a patriarchy. The idea of men voting was that men were voting for the family, right? So the idea wasn't that women were totally disenfranchised non-political entities, right? The idea was that they expressed their vote through their husbands.
Yeah. Well, how is that not patriarchy? I support patriarchy, so I don't really see an issue with it.
Well, okay, I'm used to the feminist definition of patriarchy, which from my understanding is that men set up society in order to benefit themselves. And
no, societies are formed to perpetuate themselves, and
yeah, they're formed organically in sort of the Hayekian.
The fact that every successful society has been patriarchal shows that it is, by definition, the workable way to run a society.
But you're using patriarchy in a different way that feminists do. I guess that's my. I mean,
I guess it's the same minus the conspiracy theory aspect.
I guess men are the primary.
No, okay, well, let's look at it this way. The setup of Aztec society was very similar to the setup of Chinese society, your early European societies, etc., with regards to gender roles. They were very, very close, and this all developed independently with almost no cultural contact between one another, which indicates to me that it's the natural way that societies form.
It's natural for farming societies that have huge social networks and span a large area to have men be the primary instrument of political action, just to be absolutely exact in what I mean and what I think you mean.
I guess I wouldn't really say that, but
Would you make that statement stronger? I mean, because
I know I just think it's necessary for civilization in general.
it's necessary for men to be the primary political actors.
Yes, because otherwise, I think you get inclusivity whenever women are involved, and you get that. You also get a tendency towards pacifism and an unwillingness to make pragmatic decisions.
You see, this is the thing, like inclusivity, equality, pacifism, like to you, it sounds okay. So to a progressive, everything I mentioned there is unmitigatingly good. To you, those things that you mentioned are totally bad.
Okay, well
but
okay.
To me, they're morally neutral propositions.
Okay,
What I want to know is, does inclusivity actually make people more ethical and better or not, right? I will use any of those propositions if it fundamentally makes people happier, more holy, more righteous, more willing to work in community with each other for the greater good. And I will not use those insofar as they detract from that.
Okay, well, how does a pacifist society survive conflict with a non-pacifist society?
I mean, I think this is the thing. Like, it's like saying pacifism is an element that's useful to use at times and not useful to use at other times.
In terms, we are incapable of fighting people like ISIS because we're unwilling to even hurt our enemies anymore.
I mean, you might be right that we have an excessive pacifism in the society. You could be right about that, right? But pacifism has its place. To me, these are like tools, right? Like, maybe you're saying progressivism is misusing these tools or treating, something that's instrumental as something that's primary, right? But to me, I can imagine a situation where pacifism would be an effective mechanism.
But I think in order for civilization to function, you need males in charge who are willing to do what it takes to preserve the society. And I think in terms of having women run society, they are just willing to do whatever it takes to feel good, to feel compassionate, to avoid conflict. And I think that's what's led to the current rash of problems, the inability to deal with issues.
You've seen Sargon's live stream, so this critique...
No, I don't watch Sargon.
Okay. But this critique, I'm sure, is not the first time you've heard this. This sounds exactly like you're the social justice warriors on the right.
They're right. No, I agree with the social justice warriors.
Okay, let me critique the social justice warriors and you in the same thing.
Okay.
Had it ever occurred to you that male and female virtues are meant to exist in complement with each other, that they are different and meant to fit together, and that you can't just have mindless defense of a society against the other, or mindless pacifism, but you need to have both mixed together in a holy unison?
And that's your conclusion from that is we need female suffrage and we need female leadership.
We need female leadership of some type. I will look practically to see which type of female leadership. But first of all, I think all things being considered equal, it is a genuine good for people who feel called to leadership roles to be allowed into those roles, unless there is something wrong that would happen, right? So if a woman wanted to become a politician, I think failing some moral block to that, she should be allowed to do that, right? But these things, like, I think that female leadership is necessary because they have a unique role to contribute. This is crazy because it violates the main idea that men and women are identical in every single way, right? Which I don't agree with, right? I believe they're complementary. But them being complementary means that you need to have female leadership in some capacity in order to make your society flourish.
Okay, well, why didn't this happen before the 19th century? Like, why wasn't this?
It did happen before the 19th century, right? Like, this is the progressive lie of history that women weren't leaders before they entered.
No, they were to a certain extent, but not in the same way they are now.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't. They're integrated behind the scenes, right? And they weren't prominent.
Yeah, traditional societies, women control the house and men control what's outside the house.
And also, even in political engagements, women would always be operating behind the scenes. Behind the successful man is a woman. That wasn't an idol, but it's absolutely true.
I agree with that. yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay, so women were in prominent roles. So you're saying that there's no way to accomplish women being integrated into the exterior leadership without destroying the notion of complementarity and genders working together for the common good. And so this is another thing. It seems like it's almost like you're saying that interaction with the feminine, at this level, hurts the masculine property, or makes it hard for it to function.
In that sense, yes, I think it does.
Yes. This is where we probably differ, I think, to a certain extent, right? Obviously, I don't agree with that. There are some contexts where you need to have gender segregated, right? You just could not run a monastery with, nuns and monks together. That would destroy the entire idea, right? You just can't have certain things being gender integrated. But I think for a large amount of the things in society today, you could have them gender integrated, and there's nothing necessary to the project. So here's the thing. Here's probably another big difference. I think that the project of bringing the genders together in a more prominent role in leadership was specifically sabotaged by a discrete bad idea, right? This Hegelian stuff that came out of the late Enlightenment. That was the idea that destroyed it, right? It could have, under different management, actually worked a lot better than it has.
See, we don't think that because we think men and women are just fundamentally different.
But I believe men and women are different. I believe that they're equal in dignity, but I believe they're complementary. So, right? But do you believe that they're so different that no amount of good management could possibly result in a society where suffrage and women's liberation was accomplished without it also destroying the good things that existed in more traditional societies?
To a certain extent, I'm sure there's exceptions, but broadly speaking, yes.
Sorry, but this sounds like you believe in progressivisms. You believe in everything that the radical progressives believe in. You just think that what they're attempting is the wrong, the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's what I said at the beginning. We do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't believe you when you said it, but you're absolutely right. That's kind of fascinating, right?
No, it's why I tend to agree more with them than I agree with moderate conservatives.
Have you ever debated a progressive?
Yes.
How did it go? I mean,
they just hysterically scream.
Yeah, I figure it must, right? Because the only thing that it's like putting an angel and a demon in the room together. I mean, here I'm learning from you, and hopefully you're learning from me, right? And we've got some intersection in our values, right? But with a progressive and a alt-righter, they both intellectually agree on all of the propositions. They just disagree, about the morals, right? So what else is there other than just screaming at each other, right? There's nothing left but conflict.
We don't normally scream at them, but
yeah. I mean, they're in power, so they've got nothing to gain from talking to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they've got nothing to gain from.
Well, I think it's ultimately. I think we both kind of see that. I kind of view power as amoral, I guess, to a certain extent, and I kind of view that. I guess to a certain extent, playing with your hands tied behind your back means you'll lose. And I guess that's kind of my issue with mainstream conservatives, is that they lose on every issue. They're unwilling to get their hands dirty. They're unwilling to actually do anything that would help their principles. And they're fighting against people who don't have any of the scruples they do. And thus they lose on every issue.
But, I mean, the scruples is what I care about. I'm trying to make a moral society. Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't care about a white society. I care about a moral society.
Okay, well, what was the last issue you guys won on?
Well, I mean, you're right. You're right. Like, I'm not exactly a Republican, but like, you're absolutely right that. I mean, yeah, we haven't lost on abortion, and because we haven't lost, that's considered a huge victory for.
No, you guys won on abortion.
What?
I mean, just right. No, you guys lost on abortion.
I mean, we didn't. I mean, I guess like we didn't
No,
lose, right?
because
It's
I don't know. Do you support the Constitution? I don't want to accuse you of something you don't.
yeah, I am a committed liberal. I am a committed
Okay,
constitutionalist.
well, the Supreme Court has that power, and they said abortion is legal. So, in your view, what can you do about that?
I mean, this is the fundamental thing, though, right? Like, uh, I want a society that lives up to its founding document and obeys it, right? The fact that that document is trampled on by tyrannical judges who can use language games to essentially subvert
Okay,
its
but
intention.
that's what
Like,
it says.
okay, that's what happened, right? But like, how am I going to actually have, like, if I do what you do, all I say is like, well, we need a dictator or something like that. That's effectively like, all I'm saying is that like I'm just giving up on the principle.
Well, but the principle doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't. If it doesn't prevent babies from being slaughtered,
Principles like this can't. You're gonna think I'm stupid for saying this, right? You're probably gonna think I'm a wacko. Well, but I'm not, because we're both Catholics, so you have to believe this to some extent. But principles like rule of law and consistency and contract, they can't fail you. They can only be failed, right? Humans beings are designed to be good and holy, right? And like the fact that attempting those virtues like hurts us in the modern world, like that does not give us permission to give up on those virtues. Like, right? Like being a Christian in, the reign of Diocletian would get your head cut off, right? But that didn't give you the right to be like, oh, well, Christianity is not working out for me. So
okay, I guess I care more about the babies who are being slaughtered than the Constitution. Is, I guess, my point of view.
Okay, I mean, I do too, but I mean, like, well, I mean, here's the thing. Again, practically, it's like an end justifying the means. First of all, like, let's be honest. It's not like you've got some like brilliant practical way to get Roe v. Wade overturned by like becoming a dictator. That's not on the table anywhere, right? So, all we're saying is like hypothetically abandoning one principle because that principle might somehow, in some sense, down the road, slow you down from pursuing another principle, right?
Okay, okay, fine then. You're saying we're impractical. How are you guys going to succeed at any of the things that you want to do?
I am a little bit a fan of. Okay, you're going to think I'm insane too, but I'm kind of a Benedict option person. I mean, don't say that, but I think that, in some sense, the society's only like the principles are only going to be saved by just making really, really robust communities with really close, tight-knit families that can, in some sense, resist the cultural forces of this age.
Well, that's been the conservative movement, amazing conservative movement for like the last 50 years, and it's had no successes.
The conservative movement over the last 50 years has been trying to actually influence policy and put the genie back in the bottle.
Right, but they abandoned the cultural sphere.
Oh, I think that's a problem. I think
entirely to the left, because we're like, well, we're gonna just leave us alone. Just leave us alone, and everything will work out. And it didn't. So I guess you're saying to me, you don't have a practical way of doing it. I don't see the mainstream right as having any practical way to implement any aspect of their agenda.
The practical way to actually accomplish this is essentially a long march through the institutions, right? Getting institutions that embody your values in the cultural sphere and preserving them, right?
Well, that's not going to happen.
That's how progressivism has essentially dominated, and that's how a counter movement to that will eventually work.
Okay, well, how are you going to do that when the left doesn't play by the same rules you do?
Well, I mean, exposing its hypocrisy, that's been my...
You assume people care about that, though.
Well, I guess I'm just shocked by the people on the alt-right. This is something that I always get to this point with... Well, I haven't really had a lot of interactions with the alt-right, but I have had a lot of interactions with progressives. Mm-hmm. And it's like, at some point, they don't care about hypocrisy, right? They don't. And it shocks me, right? Like, I guess maybe I'm just too old-fashioned. Like, I think that people should be offended by hypocrisy, and people on the alt-right and people in the progressive movement don't seem to be offended by hypocrisy.
Well, I am. I just practically don't know how much it really matters. I just don't think the public really cares.
I mean, don't you believe the Christian notion that people will be attracted to devoutly ethical people, and this will
I don't really. I think the masses will just do whatever they're told and whatever they're conditioned to do, generally speaking.
I mean, it's so hard to find a person who's more pessimistic than me. I think I might be the optimist in this sense. I think that there is a precedent for saints to turn people's heads, right? Like, you think everyone's just going to be eating out of feeding bags from the hands of their corporate and progressive masters in 20 years, right? That they're all going to sell their souls to, for the next gadget. And, I mean, to a certain extent, there's some evidence for that, but man, that's depressing.
Well, I'm trying to live in the real world here. I don't really. The only alternative is we'll have bloody civil war-like scenarios, which we will probably have in Europe. And
you seem to think that's a foregone conclusion.
I don't know if it's a foregone conclusion or not, but it certainly is heading in that direction.
But here's a problem for you, though, right? Your problem is that, you know what? I think these people, the progressives and the corporate cronies, they're praying for a disaster, right? Because these are people who've been trained from they've been trained during their entire education to essentially exploit crises, right? So failing some crisis that's so massive that it just takes society out at its most basic level, any crisis that occurs in the interim will be exploited to those ends and essentially turn towards the ends of the people that are essentially your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, hoping for crisis in that thing is probably not very smart, right?
Maybe. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I am not convinced that I am more pessimistic than most people in the alt-right. I actually have such a low opinion. I think people will choose feeling good over survival. So I personally doubt there will be any type of civil war. I think people will just accept ISIS like beheading them rather than fight.
Well, some people will.
No, I think, I just think as a society, we don't have the strength to make anything more than feeble gestures. I think that's how weak we are. A lot of people think that when we're faced with life or death, we'll have some sort of revelation and wake up again. I tend to be more pessimistic.
So what do you think is going to happen? This civilization is going to completely destroy itself, essentially?
Probably.
Well, I mean, that's more pessimistic than... I mean, in some sense, I think you're surprising me in being more pessimistic than I am. We'll say that. That's for sure. But I mean, don't you think then it's a moral responsibility to create enclaves, cultural enclaves that can resist this process?
Yes, I just don't see how it's possible.
Okay, here's the thing. You're a Catholic. Do you have like a Catholic community that's Orthodox?
No.
No, you don't. Okay, I guess that's one advantage I have is I know people who are devout Catholics. I know a lot of young people who are devout Catholics. I know 23-year-old people who are becoming Carmelite nuns, and I know people who are 28 and just finished their PhD and are going into the priesthood, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen these communities. They can exist. They can exist even in the heart of some of the most, corporate and soulless progressive cities in the world. And you look at people I really admire conservative Jews and Orthodox Jews living out their faith in the middle of New York City. This is possible to do.
Mm-hmm.
so it is possible to create these communities. I guess maybe. Do you think your pessimism stems from the fact that you have never seen these green shoots? Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
and then their kids go to university.
okay, you don't think that, but I think okay, but that's the problem. If you can create intergenerationally robust communities like this, then then uh, it's possible to actually to actually make these things sustainable.
Okay, well, how do you deal with the issue of university at the short term? That you can be raised in the most conservative society, and then you go to university and you become far left.
We create alternative
Okay, but
institutions.
that'll
We create
take
subversive institutions in universities. What?
that takes decades. In the meantime, the bleeding
Yeah,
is
Argent,
going.
it's going to take decades. There's no way this is not going to take hundreds of years to do, right?
Well, I don't think we
We're
have.
building a cathedral right now, right? And we're not going to live to see it constructed, right? But we got to start cutting the rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the foundation's got to go down, and it's going to take generations, right? What's the alternative, right? I mean, I don't know. I keep on saying, like, I keep on talking to you like you and me want the same world, and I'm not even so sure that's necessarily the case. The only thing is we want somewhat similar. Uh, my ideal world would be fundamentally multiracial, and I'll tell you why. The reason why my world will be okay. First of all, I don't believe that races have moral distinctions, right? And there's primary loyalties that are strung in between races right now that would be utterly evil to violate. I'm not tearing families apart. I'm not tearing churches apart. I'm not going into convents and splitting them down the middle and saying that all the Asian sisters have to go here and all the white sisters have to go here. That's fundamentally unethical from my perspective. However, like, the reason why I would want a society, a traditional society, to be multiracial is because one of the reasons why the progressive movement is so strong and they're so easy to defeat traditionalists or anyone else is they're saying we are the only people that can manage a multicultural society. We're the only game in town, right? If there is a strongly traditionalist community that is multiracial and sort of multicultural, with common values, they can challenge that impression, right? They can say, hey, look, we have traditionalism, and we're multiracial and multicultural, and look at that. You don't have to necessarily, go to the social justice warriors for education in a multicultural society. You don't have to set your integration programs up to look like they do in modern universities, where essentially they're saying, it's either ethnic war or it's functionally cultural Marxism.
Okay, well then why isn't Latin America more successful? Why are the most diverse countries in Latin America such basket cases? They
I mean,
basically did what you said.
no, they basically, I mean, Latin America. This is the hard thing about Latin America. The first part of the history, they essentially had apartheid, and the second part of this history, they essentially had Marxism and fascism. And in between that, I'm kind of not surprised that those things didn't work, because apartheid states and communist states and fascist states always fail.
Okay, so you're going with the "it doesn't work, so it hasn't been tried" thing.
It, yeah, I think I'm proposing building something brand spanking new that's never been done before, right? That's that's my project.
The closest thing to what you're discussing is Singapore, and it largely functions because the Chinese run it with an iron fist.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, but it does there are the people, the cultural Marxists who we both have problems with, right? Like, um, they have shown that you can have common values inside the framework of an interracial community, right?
See, I don't think we do have common values. I think it's kind of smoke and mirrors, to be honest.
You don't think that the modern progressive movement has common values?
It's an interesting question. They do consist of Islamists and feminists and black nationalists and anti-racialists. I think they're just kind of united by their hatred of what was the standing order. I don't think they really there is, if you get down to it, ideological unity of any kind there.
Um, so, uh, well, in that case, they're just going to dissolve really soon, right? And your problems will be over.
Well, no, I mean, and that may happen. The issue is with the level of industrialization we have, they can kind of keep paying off the various factions. The question is how long they can keep paying everybody off, remains to be seen.
Maybe indefinitely, given how technology is going.
Right. Um, I don't know. It's interesting. The kind of the wild card in this is Islam because I think it will force these questions at some point.
No, there's some basis for that. There's always the possibility that the Muslim world is going to clamp down on this radicalism before the West really has to deal with it outright.
I
But it
guess
doesn't look like that's
I don't
happening.
really see that happening.
It's not happening right now. One would hope that it would happen soon. But if not, it's just going to be this radicalism is just going to grow until it's literally the West versus radical Islam with no intermediary of Muslim states in between.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that could force an issue of some kind. But again, that's what we're talking about is like a total collapse then, right?
I don't know. I just am trying to go with what I think is possible.
I mean, okay. Wait, so what objections do you have about can I put I've elucidated my main objections, the fact that I don't believe there's moral distinctions between races, regardless of race realism. I don't believe that I want my traditional community to be interracial, and I believe that what we should do is create traditional, robust societies, not inside main society, and not get obsessed with race. So those are my objections to all right. What are your objections with my project, like with sort of the more Burkean Benedict option stuff?
I just see no evidence that that works.
But I haven't seen any evidence that your idea works.
Okay, well, we haven't been leading the right for the last 50 years.
But neither have. I guess you think that I'm some kind of mainstream Republican, but I'm not. I'm like this strange mix of Burkean and distributist and libertarians ideas. I haven't led anything, or people like me haven't led anything, certainly.
I don't. I don't. Just to me, the mainstream right has never really accomplished anything. So I don't have any real trust in them.
I guess I just don't share your.
Well, what victories have they? Like, what great defeats of progressivism have they won?
Well, I mean, they have won a few of them. The problem is they won essentially a victory on crime rates in the 80s and 90s, or it seems like they might have.
Right, but more or less in turning a large percentage of the black youth population.
What?
Well, they largely did that by interning a large percentage of the black youth in America, which is why the incarceration rate is so high.
I think you could accomplish the same thing by reducing the incarceration rate, and then this following sort of the very, very active police force policies, with possible safety measures put in place to prevent a lot of violent interactions between the police and the inner city youth, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that might or might not be possible. Frankly, I'm not so sure it is. But I mean, this all hinges on what you think is possible to do. And so, do you think, to get back on the script thing, do you think the alt-right's growing?
Yes.
Is this a common opinion?
Yes.
Okay. I think that from what I can tell, you're right about that. do you think that what do you think is going to happen when people can't ignore you anymore? I mean, that's a good. I guess it's a stupid question, but
I don't really know what they can do, to be honest. I mean, to a certain extent, they already kind of have ostracized us, and in many countries implemented as much oppression as they reasonably can. So,
I think that might be cracking right now. Progressivism has been they've been overusing racism, like people overuse antibiotics, and now everyone's starting to get resistant to it. I don't even react to the word racism anymore like I used to. It's just this, everyone's racist, so actual racists, like essentially the alt-right, if you don't mind me saying, like that the word can't really be applied with any weight anymore. So I agree that
I don't like realistically. What can they do? They've already ostracized us. They've already, in my country, they frequently arrest people who have political opinions they disagree with. I don't really know like what are they going to do? They can do what they do in France, where they basically have rigged the electoral system to prevent the National Front from winning. But ultimately, like, what more can they really do? By kind of refusing to give anyone a seat at the table, they've given up all the ability to really kind of influence or control it.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I mean, I guess you're right. They I don't think you understand. I think some people in their movement do understand this. When they actually do notice you are a significant movement, you're going to get a repression like you've never seen. Like, they're going to freak out, right? Like, the progressive movement is going to freak out the second they realize that your movement is stronger than just a bunch of white guys, as what did that guy say, masturbating to anime in dark basements, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they see something more powerful than that, they're going to freak out and hit you with everything they have.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do, your movement's going to be pretty much smashed, I think.
I don't know. You have a lot more confidence in them than I do.
I respect their ability to destroy movements they disagree with. I mean, I don't know, and that's certainly the case. I mean, I kind of want both of you guys to lose. Full admission right now, right? It's kind of like looking at Alien versus Predator right now. I mean, I guess at the time being, for me, progressives seem to be more antagonistic and are causing more harm to me. But to tell you the truth, if you guys got into power, you'd probably try to destroy the community I'm a part of too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you literally would be doing things that would actively harm it. The community I am a part of is multiracial, right? And if we go around having people trying to foment like a race war, like, that's going to tear families apart. It's going to tear churches apart, right? It's going to be fundamentally destructive to my project.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so like, I'm being like Sargon right now. I'm trying to be as sympathetic with you as possible, and the reason why is because we have a common opponent at this point, mm-hmm. right? But if the power dynamics changed, it might be a lot harder for me to be sympathetic with you, because fundamentally, it seems like you and the social justice warriors have the same moral blind spot, if I might put it. In my opinion, you've got a lot of stuff right about you. And some stuff about the social justice warriors and the progressives is right too, but there seems to be a moral blind spot here that.
Well, you haven't really established that. Pretty much everything you've said is that's not practical. That's not practical. That's not practical. That's not really a moral argument.
Well, there's one thing I think is not just practical, but it's unethical, and that is fomenting racial differences that would tear primary loyalty.
And I don't think Brazil is ethical either.
I mean, you're saying, my understanding of your argument is that you think the implementation of my ideas will result in more suffering, more harm, more families being torn apart, more churches being torn apart, And I think your implementation will result in that in the short term, with no noticeable lessening of the risk of some eventual collapse happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, what the main disagreement is. I think that if we take care of being ethical and being community oriented, and focus on the morals, I think that that's the best safeguard we have against an eventual collapse that will come. If we discard, okay, actually, here's a good example. Do you watch Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Okay, I know that this blogger who I'm having discussion with, Anti-Dem, writes about Game of Thrones frequently. What?
He's a friend of mine.
Okay, well, okay. So I sometimes read his blog. He's a really good writer, actually. Despite the fact that I disagree with a ton of stuff he talks about, I have to give him kudos for that, right? He's actually one of the reasons why I had to take a second look at this movement and kind of got caught off guard by it. But he wrote this thing when Pope Francis was elected, right? Mm-hmm. About how if he could choose a character of Game of Thrones that the next pope would be the most like, it would be Tywin Lannister, right?
Yep.
Okay, I kind of see where he's going with it, right? What does the Catholic Church need? It needs a person who's going to take out the trash, right? It needs a person who's going to get rid of these pedophile priests. It needs a person that's going to reinvigorate the base and make a moral witness again, and and send up the banner that, hey, the Catholic Church is back. It's going to contrast both progressive culture and corporate culture, and it's going to actually be a moral witness again. That's what it needs. And to some extent, Tywin Lannister is very much like that, right, in Game of Thrones. Tywin Lannister has another really big problem. Now, I know George R. R. Martin is an idiot, but he seems to have come across this piece of wisdom, if only by copying masters from early eras who understood this. The tragic flaw of Tywin Lannister is that he fundamentally undermines the very basis of the society he exists in, right?
Right.
He goes around. Tywin Lannister wants to make his house great again, and to a certain extent, he accomplishes this by being very ruthless. And to a certain extent, it works. But if you go around, but what he does is he fundamentally undermines the very basis for the structure he wants to begin with. He has people violate their primary loyalties. He has people kill the people they are sworn to protect. He has people murder guests in their own house. He encourages families to turn upon each other. And by the time he is killed by a member of his own family, nonetheless, he has superficially made his house powerful, but he's set his house up and every other house in the entire world to essentially crumble, right? Because he's undermined the very superstructure that he wants to build his new world on. Mm-hmm. And if you go around doing this, if you go around doing unethical things, tearing families apart, there's no chance that there's going to be any recovery after a cataclysm, if a cataclysm does occur.
It worked pretty well in Chile.
Where is Chile right now? Is it some kind of scion of... I don't know.
Well, that's because they went back to democracy. I mean, I think if Pinochet had stayed in power and he had to pass it off to successor, it probably would be going pretty good.
Well, Pinochet didn't stay in power because he totally undermined his moral authority by murdering people who disagreed with him.
Well, I think that... Well, I support that, so...
But... You're forget the moral problems with that, right? Like Tywin Lannister style. Like, let's say you have no problem with Red Wedding, right? Like, to use another Game of Thrones analogy. Like, morally, you just don't believe there's going to be eternal consequences for it, which I believe there will be eternal consequences for that. Mm-hmm. But let's say you don't, right? Even if you don't, the Red Wedding is a bad idea because the Red Wedding undermines any moral structure that will reemerge once you take power. If people see that your morals aren't worth shit, pardon, I swore, excuse me. If they see that your morals are fundamentally discardable, then any institution you build in the collapse is going to be destroyed because it's not going to have that moral basis to sustain itself. And that's sort of the fundamental problem I have with this movement. Like I don't know. I mean, like... I don't know.
I know. I think you have a naively optimistic view of human nature.
You are the first person who's ever said that to me in my entire life. I'm usually the dour pessimist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it just means that, you know, yeah, I mean, I guess this is just, you know, this is just a contrast. I'm talking. I have never talked to alt-right people before, but that's probably where we stand ethically, right? I think we pretty much. Can I bring up one last conversation point before we close out?
Okay. Yep, I need to go soon.
Yeah, I need to go in about 20 minutes. And this is the thing. So going forward, we have progressives, broadly old-fashioned conservatives like myself, old liberal conservatives, we could call them, and the alt-right. Do you think there's any opportunities for people to work together, not work together in the future? You know?
I don't know. Both the mainstream right and the progressives have said they will never negotiate with us under any circumstances or even have a conversation. So long as that stays, because that's what National Review Online Revolt was all about.
When was this in the past or was this recently?
That was recent.
Was this the anti-Trump stuff they did?
Yeah. And they fired Ann Coulter and a couple other people.
Oh, that was ages ago, though. That was like 10 years ago.
They fired Ann Coulter 10 years ago?
Yeah, they fired her in like 2002, didn't they?
Okay, well, it wasn't. It was, I forget, they fired someone else, but there was a stream of things they were doing.
Was it Derbyshire or whatever his name is?
Yeah.
That British guy?
Mm-hmm.
Dellingpole? No, Derbyshire, right?
Yeah. So that led to, I forget the ins and outs of it. I wasn't really involved in it with it, but there was National Review Revolt, and they were able to dramatically decrease the subscription numbers of National Review as kind of a punishment for their anti-Trump position.
Well, yeah, I mean, but hold on. So I guess, I mean, this is the problem. I mean, like, your movement's kind of poisonous at this time. Like, progressives can't make an alliance with you because their movement ends if they do, right? I don't really. I mean, working together, I don't see how can you. It's incredibly hard to lead and integrate. I mean, you can't. There's moral problems with working together. I'm usually very conciliatory with progressives. I'm like, okay, let's work together to tackle this issue, right? But I have a hard time seeing what project, you know, a conservative like me and an alt-righter like you could work together on. It's just a little bit difficult, right? I mean,
well, from our perspective, there's no distinction between you guys and the left. You're just whatever the left was 20 years ago.
But I mean, we're not. The left 20 years ago wasn't pro-life and pro.
Okay, well, 50 years ago. I don't know. It's basically because in general, you guys are incapable of making traditionalist arguments.
We're in the Overton window, is what you mean, right?
Well, no. Well, it just like the argument against gay marriage that is made by the mainstream right is, oh, it wasn't around when I was a kid. You can't, because
that's not the argument that actual Catholics make against gay marriage.
Okay, but that's the mainstream argument.
The actual Catholic argument against gay marriage does presuppose a lot of things about human sexuality that are no longer accepted by mainstream society. I mean, we're a counterculture, I guess, right? Right,
and no, but in general, I kind of believe if you do believe in equality, if you do believe in the Constitution, if you do believe in freedom, you have to accept gay marriage. Because I don't think you have any moral reasons to reject it in your worldview.
How do I not have them? You mean like, well, okay, you're probably going to roll your eyes at this too, but I believe in the disestablishment of marriage as a state institution. I have every moral reason to oppose gay marriage when it comes to being a church institution, though.
Okay, so that's my point exactly.
That what? That I'm giving the progressives what they want?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess in some sense.
No, you're unwilling to sacrifice freedom for the good of society.
I am unwilling to sacrifice principles for the good of society. Yes, because society's purpose is to pursue those principles. And
Even if it
when it
leads
becomes
to...
destructive to those principles, I no longer am interested in it.
Okay, so you're fine with gay marriage as a civil institution, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not fine. I'm fine with no marriage as a civil institution. Like, marriage is a religious institution.
So you want a secular state then?
The church created, well, not the church, but religions created marriage, and the state took it over, right? If the state denigrates marriage like it has in the past 50 years, it lost its responsibility to effectively use that word and should no longer.
This is why you guys lose on every issue, because you're just willing to cede these large parts of the public to the left. Like, well, okay, I guess then it can't be. We can't. God forbid we actually try to engineer things our way for once. We just have to slash and burn and withdraw. Slash and burn and withdraw. Okay, so you guys can do that, and we'll see what the state has to give up responsibility for next. I
mean, you have a point, because as soon as that happened, immediately the state entered in and forced Catholic institutions to pay for abortions and birth control. So I can see how that principle would look foolish every time there's a withdrawal on the interaction of the right and the state. There's a simultaneous increase of the left interaction with the state, right? Mm-hmm. So I can see how that would appear foolish, but it is actually a principle, right? How are you going to get principles by discarding them every time there's a practical opportunity that requires you to discard them? They're not principles anymore.
Okay, well, how are you going to have principles if you don't exist, if you and your way of life don't exist anymore?
Well, I mean, like, you're going to have principles like the Christians did in the age of Diocletian. I mean, that matters.
I guess I'm just not that suicidal.
I'm not suicidal. It's not.
No, but you're
a martyr isn't suicidal. I'm not. I feel like I'm saying like I'm a martyr. But like, standing up for your principles in the face of danger is not suicide. It's standing up for what you believe in. And if you die, you're dying for a purpose.
Even if your society dies?
Like, societies come and go, you know?
Okay. So we shouldn't bother to... Okay, well, I guess that's the thing.
I'll fight for society if that's I'll fight for society. Okay, societies that have no morals are as good as dead, right? That's how you collapse a society is to take every principle it stands for and hypocritically undermine it, right? Like, ideas have consequences, right? And that's there's no way around that, I suppose, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, like, it's the Tywin Lannister dilemma, right?
To me, I think you have to survive the short term to worry about the long term.
But I am surviving the short term. I mean, I'm not immediately being like thrown in jail. Like, this isn't Stalin Russia yet, at least.
Right, but we're seeing... But the public's view of marriage completely reversed in the span of 10 years. So yeah. It is short term.
No, actually it didn't, though. That's the thing. Okay. Right? They laid the seeds. People didn't understand what they were conceding to when they authorized no-fault divorce. Gay marriage was as good as enacted when no-fault divorce came out in the 50s. It took them 50 years to get there. It was a long, slow march of the institutions. The gay marriage in 10 years is a magician's hat trick. They did the work ahead of time, and they pulled it out of their sleeves and pretended like they were so powerful they accomplished the cultural change in a short amount of time.
Okay,
it took them years to do that.
I think I'm gonna have to go, but I think we've discovered the core issue here is I'm willing to compromise for the preservation of society, and you are not.
Actually, I would agree. Well, the preservation of society. Yeah, to a certain extent, I think we've hit on the core disagreement morally between the two of us, and you've done a very good job explaining your position. So thank you very much, Argent. Can you just tell me where I can find more of your writings? Perhaps give a little bit of a lead out, 5 minutes.
Just my channel. Just search for Argent Templar, and it should come up.
Okay, great. So I'll put your blog in my show notes, and you can put mine in your show notes if you publish this or
Okay.
decide to. But I think in these 2 hours we have really gone over exactly what the disagreement is. I hope I didn't come off as too aggressive. I'm trying to be conciliatory,
No, you
but
didn't scream at me, so
I have to be forceful when I think that I really feel something is going. But I think we elucidated why we can't work together as a movement, which is unfortunate, but probably unavoidable. So great. Just to give my piece, I am an amateur blogger. I blog at Data Distributists at WordPress, and my blog will probably be I blog mostly about religious and statistical stuff, just my own interests. It's not alt-right at all. It's mostly Catholic and mostly about data. So great. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me, Argent. It's been really very interesting, a little bit depressing, certainly, but I'm really glad you were able to come on and teach me about this movement that seems to be growing in modern society. Yeah, hopefully, maybe we can do this sometime in the future. There's more to discuss, or specifically to discuss where our two communities interact. But thank you again.